My name is Eleanor Hayes and I am 41 years old. I work in the insurance industry as a risk management specialist. My job is to analyze data, identify potential risks, and propose solutions before they become real problems. I have dedicated my entire career to preventing financial losses that could devastate people's lives, a lesson I learned very early in life. My husband, David Hayes, 45, is a financial technology consultant. He has a sharp mind, a strategic way of thinking, and is always chasing potential investment opportunities. His financial acumen and analytical skills immediately caught my attention when we first met at a financial technology conference in Chicago. I was impressed by his ability to argue his points logically, without being dry or rigid but rather persuasive and engaging. We got married after a year of dating. There was no fiery romance like in novels, but between us there was respect and partnership. We were like two perfectly matched puzzle pieces, sharing the same vision and prioritizing our careers above all else. From the very beginning we discussed not having children. It wasn't an easy decision, but we both agreed that we wanted to focus on career growth, financial investments, and enjoying life without the responsibilities of raising a family. To us, a stable, financially secure life was more important than traditional family joys. After 15 years of marriage we had built a solid foundation. Both of us had stable, high-paying jobs, owned a luxury apartment in Manhattan, a vacation home on the Maine coast, and a significant investment portfolio. We managed our finances transparently, a shared account for household expenses, while each of us maintained separate accounts for financial independence. This system worked seamlessly for years, creating a perfect balance between partnership and personal freedom. From the outside our marriage seemed like a success. No loud arguments, no lingering conflicts, just a well-structured, stable partnership, much like a carefully managed investment portfolio. For 14 years I believed that was enough. I can't pinpoint the exact moment things started to change, but looking back, the small signs appeared like scattered puzzle pieces I had never thought I needed to put together. David had always been a hardworking man. His schedule used to be consistent, leaving home at 7:30 a.m., returning by 6 p.m., and often sharing dinner with me. But about 6 months ago those habits started to shift. At first it was just a few late nights due to client meetings, then checking work emails after dinner and quickly ending phone calls whenever I walked into the room. I noticed he never left his phone unattended anymore, often placing it face down on the table and even switching it to silent mode at home. I told myself it was probably work stress. After all, the financial technology sector is unpredictable, and David had mentioned that he was pursuing a major project with an important client. I didn't want to appear paranoid without proof, but my instincts, sharpened by years in risk management, were beginning to warn me that something wasn't right. One Saturday afternoon while cleaning the kitchen I accidentally found an envelope placed on David's desk. It had the logo of a bank we had never used before. I hesitated for a few seconds before deciding to open it. Inside was a credit card statement from an account I had never known existed. My eyes scanned the transaction. $1,750 spent at a luxury watch boutique. $820 at a restaurant in Boston, far from where we lived. $5,200 spent at a high-end furniture store. And the most alarming one, a $900 deposit for a private P.O. box. David had never mentioned any of these expenses. I held the statement in my hands, my palms turning cold as I realized that he had a secret credit card, and it was being used for things completely unfamiliar to me. I decided not to confront him immediately. I needed more information. In the following weeks, I watched him closely. I noticed that David started withdrawing cash more frequently but never in large sums. $480 today, $530 last week, then $450 a week later. Each withdrawal was just below the bank's notification threshold, as if he was deliberately avoiding alerts. At the same time I discovered that he started receiving mail at a private P.O. box instead of our home. This worried me the most. David had never had a reason to do that before. The unease inside me kept growing. I couldn't sit back and ignore it any longer. So I decided to do something I never thought I would have to do. I checked the home security system. We had installed security cameras a long time ago, partly because there had been a few minor break-ins in the neighborhood. I opened the app on my phone and scrolled through the saved footage from the past week. At first there was nothing suspicious, but when I reached 4:18 a.m. on Monday, I suddenly froze. In the faint blue glow of the screen I saw David standing at my desk flipping through my personal financial documents. He bent down, took out his phone and began photographing each page one by one. I zoomed in on the screen. It was unmistakable. my bank documents, my personal accounts, investment statements, and some paperwork containing financial login details. A cold chill ran down my spine. What was David doing with my financial information at nearly 4:30 in the morning? I continued watching the video, my heart pounding in my chest. David checked his phone, scrolled through the screen as if comparing data, then quickly closed the file, placed everything back exactly as it was, and left the room. My breathing felt heavy as I realized this couldn't be mere curiosity. David wasn't just being secretive about finances, he was actively trying to access my accounts without my knowledge. Suddenly all the scattered signs I had noticed before came together like a puzzle, forming a clear picture. Mysterious spending on a secret credit card. A private P.O. box. Frequent cash withdrawals. Secretive phone calls. And now, sneaking into my office in the early morning to photograph my financial documents. I gripped my phone tightly, a surge of fear and anger rising inside me. I no longer had any doubts. David was hiding something from me, something serious. And I needed to find out exactly what it was before it was too late. I set my phone down on the table, my heart still pounding after replaying the footage. What I had just seen was no longer a vague suspicion or unfounded worry. This was real? David had intentionally attempted to access my personal finances secretly in the dead of night. I knew I couldn't act impulsively. If I confronted him now, he would only come up with excuses, perhaps a cleverly crafted lie to divert my attention. I needed proof. I needed to understand what he was doing and, more importantly, why. The next morning I went into my office, opened my laptop, and checked our bank accounts. Nothing unusual in our joint account. Transactions were steady, no sudden withdrawals or unexplained transfers. But when I switched to my personal savings account, a cold wave ran through me. A request to add a new user had been submitted the day before. The user, David Hayes. I stared at the screen, feeling the blood rush to my face. He had tried to add himself as a co-owner of my savings account. If the request had been approved, he would have full access, able to withdraw, transfer, or even close the account entirely. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and immediately declined the request. Then, without hesitation, I called the bank. Hello, this is Eleanor Hayes. I just noticed an unauthorized request to add a user to my account. I did not make this request. The representative on the other end paused briefly before responding. Thank you for reporting this, ma'am. To confirm, would you like us to place a fraud alert on your account? Absolutely, and I also want to change all security measures, including my passwords, security questions, and contact email. We'll take care of that immediately, she assured me. Additionally, we recommend monitoring your account closely and reporting any further suspicious activity. I thanked her and hung up. I had stopped him in time, but the biggest question remained unanswered. Why was David doing this? Was he having financial problems? Or was this just the tip of something much bigger? I needed a more careful approach. I called Diana Brooks, an old friend and forensic accountant I had worked with on a fraud case a few years ago. Eleanor, it's been a while, calling me during work hours. This must be serious. I didn't beat around the bush. Diana, I need your help. I suspect my husband is doing something wrong involving my finances. The light-heartedness in Diana's voice disappeared. Tell me everything. I recounted everything. The suspicious transactions, the private P.O. box, the small but frequent cash withdrawals, and the video of him photographing my financial documents in the early morning. Diana was silent for a long moment. Eleanor, this isn't just curiosity or poor financial management. He's trying to gain control over your assets. We need to do something before this spirals out of control. Can you help me monitor the accounts? Of course. I'll set up a financial surveillance system to track any suspicious activity in the accounts linked to you. Also, I think you should consult a lawyer. That statement made me pause. A lawyer. I had never imagined I would need to hire one to protect myself from my own husband. But now, I had no other choice. I couldn't sit back and let David continue manipulating my finances. I needed a way to confirm my suspicions, undeniable proof of his intentions. So, I decided to create a bait account. I opened a new savings account at a different bank, depositing enough money to make it look attractive, $75,000. Then, I placed a fake bank statement in my document folder, labeling it as my primary savings account, and deliberately left it on my desk. I also changed my online banking password to something easier to guess than my usual standards, just to see if David would attempt to log in. Finally, I set up a login alert on the account so that if anyone tried to access it, I would receive a notification immediately. I knew it might take weeks to get a result, but I was willing to wait. That evening David came home on time as usual. He kissed me absently, placed his briefcase on the table, and headed into the kitchen to prepare dinner. As I watched him, I wondered how long I had been living with a man like this without seeing his true face. But I didn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I had set the trap. Now I just had to wait and see if he would take the bait. The next morning after David left for work, I opened my laptop and checked the bait account. A transfer request had been made at 3:02 a.m., but due to two-factor authentication, it had not yet been processed. The amount? $50,000. A significant sum, but not enough to completely wipe me out if I hadn't caught it in time. I sat frozen in front of the screen, a cold, simmering rage building inside me. There was no doubt anymore. David had tried to steal from me without leaving a trace. If it weren't for this trap, I might have only realized it when it was too late. I didn't cancel the request immediately. Instead, I contacted the bank, reported it as an unauthorized transaction, and requested a fraud alert on all my accounts. Then, I changed every password, enabled extra security layers, and contacted a financial expert to closely monitor all accounts linked to me. I needed to know where David was spending this money, and I couldn't afford to wait without more information. I called Diana and asked her to investigate David's recent transactions. When she sent me the spending list, I couldn't believe my eyes. In the past 3 weeks, David had spent nearly $100,000. $3,600 for a two-person getaway at a luxury resort in Aspen. $7,800 at a high-end jewelry store. $4,500 for a first-class flight to Miami. $9,200 at an electronics boutique. I tried to remain calm as I read the list. None of these transactions involved me. Every single expense was for someone else. A sharp pain ran down my spine as the harsh reality set in. This wasn't just financial manipulation. I needed definitive proof. I contacted James Carter, a private investigator I had heard about from a colleague. I gave him a brief rundown of the situation and asked him to track David. I wanted to know exactly where he was going, who he was meeting, and what he was doing with the money he was recklessly spending. 3 days later, James sent me a series of photos. The night before, David had gone to a high-end restaurant downtown. He wasn't alone. With him was a younger woman with long brown hair, wearing an elegant red dress. On her wrist was a sparkling bracelet, one that I immediately recognized as the $7,800 piece of jewelry David had bought. I opened James's message. Her name is Madison Blake, 30 years old, David's assistant. I sat still, my phone cold in my hand. I had heard that name before. Madison had been working with David for over a year, someone he had occasionally mentioned in conversations about work, but she had never seemed particularly important. I had never thought about her, never had a reason to be suspicious. But now, she was the one spending the enormous amounts of money David had deliberately hidden from me. I opened the next set of photos. David and Madison sat across from each other, engaged in intimate conversation. In another picture, he placed his hand over hers, a gesture far beyond that of mere colleagues. There was no doubt left. David wasn't just trying to take my money, he was using it to finance another woman's lifestyle. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the pain I thought I should. I felt only one thing, a cold determination. David thought he was smart, thought I would never find out, thought he could deceive me without leaving a trace. He was wrong. I had enough evidence, and now I was going to show him exactly who I was. I knew I couldn't just confront David with words. I wanted him to be caught in a situation he couldn't deny, and this time, I would control the game. 2 days after receiving the report from the private investigator, an unexpected email landed in my spam folder. A reservation confirmation from an upscale restaurant. I recognized it immediately. This was the restaurant David often took VIP clients to, but this time, the person he was meeting wasn't a business partner. I clicked on the email, reading every detail carefully. Table for 2, Saturday night, 8 p.m., reservation under David Hayes. I felt my anger rise, but instead of letting it consume me, I smiled. David had just given me the perfect opportunity to strike. On Saturday evening, I chose a sleek, form-fitting black dress, applied subtle yet sharp makeup, and headed to the restaurant not alone. I had invited Diana, my closest friend and trusted financial expert, to join me for this performance. We arrived right on time. I requested a discreet table in a corner that provided a clear view of the entire elegant dining space. The soft lighting, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle murmur of conversations created the perfect setting for a romantic evening. And then they arrived. David walked in, dressed in a tailored gray suit, hair neatly styled as if preparing for the perfect date. Beside him was Madison Blake, her long brown hair softly curled, wearing a form-fitting red dress, and most importantly, the diamond bracelet David had bought with my money. I gripped my wine glass tighter, but I didn't let my emotions take over. I waited. I watched as they settled into their seats. I watched as David smiled effortlessly. I watched as Madison leaned toward him. I watched as they let themselves believe no one was watching. Then I stood up. I walked straight toward their table, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor. Deanna followed, her phone ready to capture the moment. David was in the middle of pouring Madison a glass of wine when he saw me. He froze mid-motion, the bottle hovering above the glass. Madison looked up, still smiling, but when her eyes met mine, that smile vanished instantly. "Good evening, you two," I said, my voice so calm it was almost chilling. "Mind if I join you?" David opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, I pulled out a chair and sat down. I placed my purse on the table, reached inside, and set down a folder in front of them. "You both seem to be enjoying a wonderful evening," I continued, "so I assume you wouldn't mind going through David's recent spending history with me?" David's face drained of color. Madison glanced at him, confused, clearly unaware of what was unfolding. I flipped open the folder, turning the pages slowly and deliberately. Aspen, 3 days, 2 nights. First-class flights to Miami, a Cartier jewelry purchase. I looked directly at Madison, my gaze sharp. "Ah, and this lovely bracelet, it suits you, Madison." She instinctively pulled her hand back, as if she had just touched fire. David swallowed, trying to regain control. "Eleanor, this isn't the place." "Oh no, David, this is exactly the place," I cut him off, locking my eyes onto his. "You thought you could take my money, spend it on her, and I'd never find out?" I reached into my bag again, pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. A video played on the screen, footage from my private investigator. David and Madison walking into a luxury hotel, laughing, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, then disappearing into the elevator. Madison's mouth fell open in shock. David sat completely still. "Would you like to explain?" I tilted my head. "Or should we move on to the next step?" I pulled out another folder, a stack of legal documents, and placed it right in front of David. "You have 2 choices," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Sign this immediately and we'll part ways amicably. No disputes over assets. I keep what's mine and you keep what's yours." David stared at the documents as if they were a knife pressed against his throat. "And if I don't sign?" I pulled out a third folder, this time filled with evidence of financial fraud, my investigation report, and records of his unauthorized transactions. "If you don't sign," I said slowly, "I will send all of this to the bank, the police, your company, and the IRS. I'm sure they'd be very interested in how you've been spending this money." David froze. Madison quietly scooted her chair away, realizing she was sitting next to a man who was about to lose everything. For a few seconds, the air in the restaurant felt frozen in place. Then David picked up the pen. He sighed. I took the folder, looked at him one last time, and said, "Thank you, David. Enjoy the rest of your evening." I stood up and walked out of the restaurant, feeling the night air fresher than ever before. 3 days after the confrontation at the restaurant, I received an email from David's lawyer confirming that he had officially agreed to the divorce terms. No disputes. No legal battles. He had no other choice. I read the email and took a sip of coffee. It was over. David had signed the divorce papers that night at the restaurant, but I knew he had still hoped to turn things around. Maybe he thought I would reconsider, that I would soften, that he could explain his way out of this. But once the documents were submitted to the court, my lawyer made one thing very clear. Everything had been set up so precisely that David had no choice but to accept. A week later, I received the official divorce decree. My name, Eleanor Hayes, stood alone on the document, no longer bound to anyone. I didn't celebrate, I didn't pop champagne like some friends suggested. I just felt relieved, a feeling I hadn't had in months. I had no intention of staying in New York much longer. This city had once been a place I loved, but now, it was just a collection of memories I wanted to leave behind. I booked a flight to Portland to meet in person with Wexler & Co., a major insurance firm that had been pursuing me for over 2 years. I had turned down their offers before because I didn't want to disrupt the life David and I had built. But now, nothing was holding me back. The meeting went better than expected. They increased their salary offer, added more benefits, and even included a relocation package. They wanted me to start as soon as possible. It took me 1 second to decide. 3 weeks later, I officially left New York. I sold the apartment David and I had shared, transferred all my assets into investments and savings, and booked a one-way ticket to Portland. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city below, a place that had once been my entire world, but was now just another chapter of my past. I felt no regrets. A few months later, on a quiet weekend morning, I was sipping coffee on my new apartment's balcony when a news alert popped up on my phone. Sentinel Financial Group under investigation for financial fraud, several top executives suspended amid ongoing probe. I clicked the article, and David Hayes' name was right in the middle of the list. I wasn't surprised. I had suspected that David's fraud wasn't limited to me, that he was likely involved in something much bigger. As a financial technology consultant, he had access to multiple transaction systems. If he had been bold enough to try and steal from my accounts, there was no reason to believe he wouldn't try similar tricks at work. According to the article, investigators had discovered unusual money transfers within the company's internal systems, and some critical documents had been tampered with. No formal charges had been filed yet, but I knew one thing: this wasn't going to end well for David. I took another sip of coffee, savoring its warmth. I didn't feel vindictive. Not even a little. I just felt at peace. Every morning I wake up in my new apartment, a place untouched by any memory of David. I walk to my new office, where my colleagues respect me for my skills, not because of the man standing beside me. I have rebuilt my life from the ground up, and that makes me stronger than ever before. I once believed that marriage was protection, that if two people built a life together, they would never betray each other. But I've learned one important lesson. Always have a safety net for yourself. Never put your complete trust in anyone, not even the person you love the most. I lost many things in this marriage, but the one thing I never lost was myself. Life doesn't always go as planned. Eleanor Hayes believed in stability, in a marriage built on respect and careful financial planning. But as her story shows, sometimes the people you trust the most can betray you the deepest. The most important lesson from this story isn't just about being cautious in love and finances, but about the power of independence. Always have a backup plan, not because you don't trust, but because you need to protect yourself from the unexpected. What do you think about Eleanor Hayes' story? Do you agree with her decisions? If you were in her situation, how would you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about life, love, and family.